Jim, welcome to the Power Talk Show. It is our honor to have you on our channel today. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and joining us today. I want to start the conversation by understanding what exactly you do and how exactly do you help the board of directors find the right person.
Traditionally, in executive search, there has been not only executive search, but board recruitment, where boards retain an executive search firm to recruit a board director that fits a certain profile. They may want a CFO. They may want somebody that's worked in China. They may want a CFO. So they give you the spec, and then we identify the people that are in those kinds of roles in other companies, and we approach them and present the opportunity. And when we have identified 5 to 10 executives, maybe 5 or 8, that are interested, appear qualified, we profile them. We set up interviews with the board to interview them, and they narrow that down to 2 or 3 favorites, and then we do references, and then they elect one of those directly to the board. That is what historically corporate executive search firms have done. Besides executive recruitment, they've done board director recruitment. What we do is something totally different. And if you want me to describe that, I'm happy to do that right now in as concise a fashion as I can. But
Wonderful.
we innovated a service that no one else has ever thought of. As an investment banker told me about 6 years ago here in town that I really respect, he said, Jim, you realize you invented a whole new SIC code. I guess we did. At some level, it is an SIC code. But I concluded with one of my major clients who was seeking a board or two to join, that it was nonsensical to say, get your resume out to the search firms, let them know you're interested. And then if they have a search that they're doing, they may call you. I thought this fellow, who was the CEO and chairman of H.J. Heinz at the time, was so valuable that he darn well ought to select the board he was going to join. He ought to be the prime mover, not waiting for the phone to ring, with usually opportunities that make no real sense. He makes sense for the company, but does that company make sense for him? So I invented a reverse board search process whereby the executive and his company retain my firm to advise him in identifying the boards that he would love to be considered by and should be considered by. And then we present a unique profile of him that is very comprehensive. We share it with the boards that don't even know he's available, or maybe that he even exists, because we're going into other industries. And on some occasion, I mean, we may identify 40 or 50 boards outside his industry category, and we force rank them in the sequence in which he'd like to discover the answer. And then we approach them. And sometimes the luck of the draw is that we've approached 50 or 60 boards and it hasn't happened. And then we go into a different mode, trying to put them on private equity boards that are creating new boards or M&A boards. Sometimes it happens on the very first call. It happened recently when we were talking to the president of the Gap out in California. We're going to put him on the board. We happened to have a conversation with the board lead director of another company. No, he was Mattel. He was Mattel. We're talking to the lead director of the Gap, asked him what he was looking for, and he basically described the profile of the executive that we were about to go public with. And we were going to approach the Gap. They were one of the top 10. And so we said, would you like to see this background? We're going to tell you about this guy. They looked at it. They interviewed him. They put him on the board. A year later, they made him the CEO. And since Richard Dixon is the CEO of the Gap today, their stock is up about 200%, or was up at 200% when we last looked at it. So that is an example of what we do. What we do is fun. It is exciting. We have more access to America's boards than anyone else in the world because we are not trying to sell them anything. If a law firm tried to call a board or an accounting firm or a management consulting firm, they say, what are you calling us for? We already have a management consulting firm. We already have a law firm. We're not trying to sell them anything. We are retained to do this. So it is free to the boards that we approach. Costs them nothing to elect one of our clients who is at the top of their game to their board. And so we've invented something that no one else in the world ever thought of. And now we've been doing it since 2006. And we've done a little over 500 of these engagements for 35% of the Fortune 100 companies and about 28% of the Fortune 500 companies. That is our story, and I'm sticking to it.
Wow, that's wonderful. And you have been in the industry for almost 20 years now. How do you see the role of board of directors evolved over the past few decades?
I think boards are years ago, maybe 3 or 4 decades ago, boards didn't necessarily understand that their role was very simple. to represent the shareholders. They were, if an executive were elected to a board, I think many of them felt their role was to support the CEO, contribute based on their experience, weigh in with what they had learned from their experience. Boards were often made up of people that the CEO or the board chairman knew. Some great boards had some great people on them. I remember the Tribune company that I did some working with had Newton Minow on it, who was John F. Kennedy's head of communications. First person in the world to say, he was a lawyer, first person in the world to say TV is a vast wasteland. And he changed the whole TV world. We had Don Rumsfeld on that board, who was the CEO of GD Cereal Company and became the Secretary of Defense for the United States government. So it was a wonderful board, and we evaluated that board. So we developed a sense of the qualifications that board directors had. And one of the things that always amazed me was they had bought a company, and so they went from 10 directors to 14 directors because they had to take 4 from the new company. And we had to figure out which 10 were going to survive. And so we asked each director to evaluate every other director anonymously. Here are 10 factors, score each of these, and we won't tell anybody who did the scoring, but we'll say director 1 scored this director that way and the others. And we asked them to score themselves. And what was really interesting was at the end, when I looked at all the results, and I looked at the individual self-scores and the scores that they gave other people, the strongest, the executives that got the strongest scores from their peers in the boardroom were the most humble and rated themselves lower. The directors that were rated lower by their peers were the least humble and rated themselves higher. So yeah, I learned a lot about boards by doing these board evaluations. And so I felt very, very comfortable in the boardroom. Boards have come a long way. The characteristics of boards now that are evaluated, there are about 10 that are key. I interviewed 30 of America's most preeminent board directors, former CEOs of great companies who are most respected in the boardroom, and asked them what these 10 were. So we know what they are. And we are capable of, when we're training boards to consider our executive clients, to consider those factors. And we weigh those factors when we evaluate our clients. Boards have evolved. I always like to say, a lot of people don't have that are outsiders. They may be stockholders, they may not be, but I'm always amazed and I was amazed 10 to 20 years ago when I really realized this. Most people think that the board directors are there to advise the executives and participate in the decision making. I always say that no, the board has only two roles, 2 decisions that they make, only 2 out of all the decisions the company makes: who owns the company and who runs the company. So if the stockholders are going to change because somebody wants to buy the company, it's the board that decides whether or not that company is going to be acquired. Or if a hostile shareholder, the board makes that decision, not the CEOs. And the other decision they make is who runs the company. They decide on behalf of the shareholder who is going to be the CEO. If the CEO is going to retire, they are involved in approving that decision. They may decide to go outside rather than take the CEO's. They make that decision on behalf of the shareholders. Everything else that the board does is they interact with the executives on the key decisions that they're making that are going to probably enhance the future of the company, one way or another. Are they going to buy a company? Are they going to sell a business? Are they going to invest in a whole new product category? How are they going to present their financial performance to the shareholders?
Jim, as you were explaining about the evaluation process, what kind of data and analytics the boards look when to hire the candidate?
Well, there are going to be references that are done, but first of all, does this person have the area of business acumen that they've been looking for? So they will talk about that person's experience in that sector. It's a CFO or chief marketing officer. They're running a business in Asia. So they will interact and ask the executive questions to be But they've also got a description of this person's qualifications for the job provided by the search firm. But they will get familiar with the person in the area in which they are seeking business acumen. That's number one. They'll also get a sense for the person's style and values. They will ask questions about their career. How did you get to be CFO? What do you see as your future? What are the issues that your company is most seriously dealing with? So that now they get to not only know the career of the person, but they get to know how they think, the decisions they've made. So they get a sense for the quality of decision making, risk taking, conservativeness that this director has, and they try to envision them dealing with those issues in their own boardroom. They will then, I always tell executives they're going to interview for a board position. Assume you're going to have about an hour. If you have less than that, this is not serious. But assume you've got an hour. Sometimes it goes longer, but it shouldn't be shorter. And this is why. They own 30 minutes of that time, and you own 30 minutes of that time. 30 minutes to get to know you, and 30 minutes for you to get to know them. Because you may decide you're not interested. They should not assume you're interested. They have to persuade you or help you understand whether this is a good decision for you. Very often, people that are interviewing for boards for the first time, they don't understand that dynamic. They will come back and I say, how did the interview go? Well, I don't know. I didn't get much of a chance to ask anything about them. I said, really? No, they were always asking me about me. I said, well, that's a shame. You should have had time to ask about them. They should have understood that you needed to ask about them. Or they simply spent all their time selling their company, not asking about the executive, or all their time asking about the executive, but not presenting their company. So I say, you're the candidate, you own this interview. And you need to stop after 30 minutes and say, I appreciate everything you shared with me about your company. It sounds very exciting. I would love to talk to you more about why I think I might be qualified for this. So that doesn't always happen perfectly, but it should be that way. It's really more about, when they listen to the person, they'll get to know them personally. They'll talk to them about their areas of strength. They'll get a feeling for what kind of a board director they will be. We are able to tell them by virtue of representing the director what kind of a board director this is going to be because we ask their references. If they work in a company, we'll interview the CEO. Tell me about what kind of a board director you think this person will be. We may be asking a couple of board directors what kind of a board director you think this person will be because you're sponsoring him. It's a very much information intensive process, but board directors, executives are looking for board directors that are significantly skilled in the area of competency they're looking for. And they trust will ask the right questions in the boardroom, not give the answers, because that's not a board director's role. It is to solicit the answers from the board, from the executives, in terms of how they're going to deal with these problems. So they need to be facile interlocutors of conversation. Tee up and ask questions. And do not say, well, when I was at GE, we had that problem. This is what we did. Bad director. They don't care what you did. So it's that role of interacting with the executive team and doing it very appropriately and possessing those 10 attributes that great directors have. So that is what both sides should be looking for in that 1 hour or 2 hours, whatever it is. So yes, boards have become much more sophisticated about their roles through board. They do self-reviews, they do board evaluation, and the really great board directors and board chairmen, they know the role of the board, what is the role and what is not the role. And if somebody has motor mouth and they want to justify their presence in the boardroom, somebody's going to have a talk with them and say, John, you consume too much oxygen in that room. You don't need to do that. We don't want you to do that. We want you only to talk when you have something valuable to contribute. We elected you because we value who you are, not how much oxygen you're going to consume in that room. Forget justifying your existence. So the style of a board director to succeed or fail is very, very important. And that's what boards are looking for. And boards have become much more sophisticated here in terms of managing their role and identifying the right kinds of directors. So that's where they've grown up and matured.
So what kind of philosophies and principles goes into your decision making? How do you select the right executive for the board?
Well, I select the right board for the executive. I do the opposite. Okay. So we have in terms of what I do, it used to be very simple. The traditional board recruiting, they say we're looking for a CEO with technology experience. You identify all the CFOs with technology experience, top 10 companies. You get on the phone or send them an email and say, I'm doing a board search for such and such. We'd love to talk to you. Very, very simple. Ours is much more complex. We interview an executive. that we retain to select the board for. We get to know them. We get to know their skill set. We know that they have great consumer packaged goods experience. So consumer products company's probably going to be good. We know that they have has some global experience. So we look for companies that has global proportions. They've been in a growth company. So we look for a company that's trying to grow, not protect it. It's not Ford Motor Company trying to sustain itself. It's the next Ford Motor Company that's coming up through the ranks that could benefit from somebody that has built a company. So it is a combination of identifying the experience, traits, accomplishments, and skills of the executive we're advising, and then overlaying those skills and saying, what kinds of boards would benefit from having this skill set in their boardroom? And so if we say there are 8 things that are special about this person, we'll look for the boards for whom growth is going to be dependent on at least 4 or 5 of those factors in getting them done. And boards are getting more sophisticated in the way that they add directors, but we've gone through this phase of diversity. And I think one of your questions is, why have boards gotten less value in terms of our
Yes.
study? Our study quantifies the weight of the board, in terms of the weight of the business acumen in the boardroom. We rate CEOs a 10, we rate CEOs a 9, we rate CEOs a 7 or an 8. We go all the way down to people who are running a museum that get on boards, and we rate them a 1. A former military general might be rated a 2. What is the weight of the business acumen that is in the boardroom? That is what we care about. If it's high business acumen, we think that problems are going to probably be considered by people that are really qualified to consider them. What DEI did, it forced the recruitment of a lot of executives that were diverse by any number of means, by origin, by gender, and a lot of those executives had not yet moved up into the CEO or reporting to the CEO role yet. They were in the divisions or
Understood.
running divisions, or they were in functional areas like human resources or legal. So they did not bring CEO or COO successor experience into the boardroom, which we rate 10 or 9. They brought in weightings of 6 or 7, meaningful weights, but not the 10s or 9s that the highest ranked boards in America, which have consistently been Parker Hannifin and what's the other one in Pittsburgh? All right, there are 2 companies in Pittsburgh, Parker Hannifin and another major company they're the top 10 boards in America because they have a lot of CEOs on their board. Now, some people say, gee, they need other kinds of people. Sure, they do. But the problem is you get down into the ranks and you get people on the boards, like AI, for example, technologies. They're specialized. The problem is that they are most competent at contributing to that topic when it comes up in the board, but they're not as competent about contributing to why they're going to rebrand their product line or why they're going to acquire a competitor in that industry. They're in there because they allow company to report appropriate progress in the DEI area. But that is what's principally brought down some of the board weight. Today, we feel that dimension has been properly and fully explored and that it's still very important, but boards know that they need a complement of people that are highly accomplished in the upper ranks of corporate business rather than checking the box of these other things. Boards are very, very, right now, the percentage of board directors that are white females is higher than the percentage of directors that are white males. So, those are the 2 main categories. And so diversity has been in overdrive for a number of years, and boards are very, very diverse today, at least in America. And at some point, you got to say, when will white males be the lowest standard of presence in the boardroom? I don't think that'll ever happen, but at some point, things didn't change, you would say diversity is a white male.
We'll wait and watch for that time and date. So, Jim, one final question: what is the biggest myth of board of directors that you would like to burst?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that this is fair, but I do believe that the myth, if there is a myth, is the large number of people out there that do not understand truly what the board's role is. I think there's a large percentage of the population that think the board actually oversees the running of the company.
Mhm.
And therefore, all business decisions need to be vetted by the board members. They say, yes, you ought to do this. And yes, we agree with that. We don't agree with this. That the board's role is really very, very limited, but very, very powerful. Who's going to own the company? Who are going to be the shareholders of the company? in the future and who's going to run the company in the future. And if they have to change the CEO, they change the CEO. But if they don't pick the CFO, they may be involved in why this person's going to be the CFO, but that's the CEO's decision. The CEO's decision is who's going to report to him or her. CEO's decision is who's going to run the business in China or in South America. All the decisions of the business are made by the CEO and the top management team, except those two. And if they get those wrong, they leave. So that's the power of the board. But they don't say, gee, when I was a GE, I question that because we did it this way. You let them make the decisions. That's what you're paying them to do. If you do a bad job, you got to change it. But that's what they're hired to do, and you've got to let them do their jobs. That, I think, is probably the biggest myth to people that aren't in the boardroom and in that role. That's what I think is the real myth. Boards don't run companies. Management runs the companies.
Full. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much for joining our channel today. It was a wonderful and a delightful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Devin. I hope it helped a lot of your listeners. Take care now. Bye-bye now.